Let me repeat what I said a little bit yesterday. I am not an expert in this, okay? I am not a professor. I am not a scholar. I've got some experience with addictions and things, and a lot of my material is coming from that. A lot of material is coming from interviews with friends. I've actually got an interview that you guys will be sharing with you tomorrow with a friend of mine who's in the church and who's been a recovering alcoholic for many years. And that interview is very humbling. It gives you a bit of an insight to how to help other addicts with these things. Before we get back on, I'd like to give you a kind of recap of what we talked about yesterday, so you're not totally in the dark. We spoke about the top 10, if you want, addictions. And some of the most obvious ones are up there, but some of them are not so obvious, are like sex addictions, work addictions, even recent today we're getting a lot of like video games and things now. I guess like Xboxes, PlayStation 2s, all these sort of things would come into it, and obviously internet. We also looked at some statistics, if you can say that word. And I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but I'm going to show you a few of them, and we'll highlight a couple. Number 2, for example. By the time most teenagers get to 15 to 16 years of age, around 80% have already used alcohol, and 65% of those have been drunk. It's quite scary stats on that. Here's another one. Number 5, around 95% of alcoholics die from the disease, and approximately 26 years earlier than normal life expectancy. And so, you know, these statistics are there for a reason, to give us a bit of a wake-up call to what's happening right in front of us and all around us. I'll give you another one there. Number 9, around 180,000 people in the UK have in the past year been instructed a drug treatment programme. Heroin was the main drug for which adults over 18 were receiving treatment, while those for under the age of 18 it was marijuana or cannabis. And that is very, very popular drug today. In fact, when I was involved in that stuff, you can get marijuana, cannabis pretty well cheap. But let me tell you, you can get heroin cheaper now. You can get heroin and cocaine and things. The stuff that was expensive back then are now cheaper than a lot of stuff. And so we saw that in many ways that an addict becomes an addict because of the circumstances in their life. And they remain addicts because ultimately it helps them change the way they feel. That's really what it's about. When you pull it all back, it's all about changing the way they feel. A way about changing their lifestyles even, and the things in the world that live in them, and these things around. We looked at the word addiction. The word addiction doesn't appear in your Bible at all anywhere, but the word addicted does. And that really helped me when it comes to putting lessons together. We see the Mickelson's Enhanced Strong Greek and Hebrew Dictionary. Dulio, I think is how you pronounce that. I'm not an expert in that. But it means to enslave. And so, you know, to enslave, all of a sudden, I'm looking around and I'm looking at a lot of addicts. And we're going to look at that a little bit today. Titus verse 3 for one example, says, at one time we too were foolish, disobedient, deceived and enslaved by all kinds of passions and pleasures. We lived in malice and envy, being hated and hating one another. The Apostle Paul, again, when he's talking about the law, he says in Galatians 4:9, but now that you know God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you're turning back to those weak and miserable principles? Do you wish to be enslaved by them all over again? And finally, in our last session, because we're still talking about our last session, by the way, we talked about the true nature of man, how man is a triune being. We saw in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5:23 that it's the only place in the whole Bible where it talks about the triune being in one passage. But it talks about we're a spirit, and a soul, and a body. And what we did, we broke all that down to see what it means as to being human. Ecclesiastes 12:7, we saw the distinction between the body and the spirit. Matthew 10:28, we saw the distinction between the body and the soul. And Hebrews 4:12, we saw the distinction between the soul and the spirit. And the time we studied that, dug into it, and found out exactly what the Bible was telling us, is basically this. we're reminded that our soul is ourself. And it's what makes us who we are. We're self-conscious. Our body is earth-conscious because we are living in a physical place. That's why we have our bodies. And finally, our spirit is God-conscious. And that's the part of us that's going to go back to God when we die. The body goes to the ground, the spirit goes back to God, and the soul is the part of us that's going to be judged. It'll either be eternally with God or eternally in hell, because we're moral beings. And so we looked at all that to remind ourselves that we're all unique human beings, created in the image of God. All of us, whether we're addicts or not. Today, we're going to look at the importance and attitude that Christians need to have towards the addicts. We're going to look at various resources to see how we can help them and actually help ourselves. Because part of our problem is we don't know where to go to begin to help people. And so we're finally going to look at those, and then we're going to look at and remind ourselves that we too are former addicts. I don't care who you are, you were a former addict. We're going to look at what addiction you had as we go through the scriptures, but you were there. But what you need to remember is that God helped you. And if God can help you, there's not a person on this planet that God cannot help. So we need to remember that. Let me tell you a story about a couple that go through a marriage counsellor, because their marriage was in a bit of a mess. And the woman said, it's all about respect. My husband gives me absolutely no respect whatsoever. He'll come home every day, he'll smell of work, he'll walk right past me in the kitchen, and he'll go straight to the fridge, he'll grab a beer, he'll plunk himself down in front of the television, and he'll drink that beer, and he'll go straight up to bed without even washing, and jump into bed. And then he gets up in the morning and goes away and does the same thing. It's because I hate it. It's all about respect. He's got none. So the husband was in this meeting listening to all this, and he thought, right, I didn't realise I was doing this. I'm going to change. So the next day, he gets up early, he takes a change of clothes, he takes some aftershave, he goes to work. When he's finished work, he decides he's going to have a shower. He has a shower, he gets smelling great, and he gets the aftershave on, and he goes back, and on the way back he stops at the florist, and they've got a huge bouquet of flowers, and then he goes to the door and he pushes the doorbell, and his wife comes to the door and looks at him smelling great, looking absolutely handsome, and she just burst out crying. And he's like, what's wrong? She goes, this has been the absolute worst day of my life. She goes, the cat got stuck up a tree, I had to phone the ambulance, the fire brigade. She goes, the kitchen floor flooded, and there was water everywhere. Your mother-in-law called to say that she's come to stay with us for 2 weeks. Your kid has been in trouble at school, he's now been suspended for 2 weeks. She goes, and after all that, you come home drunk. I guess once we make up our mind that a person has lived in a certain way, it's difficult for us to change our mind, isn't it? It's difficult for us to do that. Let me ask you this. What do you see? What do you see? Addicts?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, how do you know they're addicts?
For what they've done to consumption.
Well, this one's snorting.
Yeah.
He's in jail.
It's interesting what people see when they look at a picture. Sometimes they look at the person, sometimes they look at the surroundings, and they make the judgment of that person based on the surroundings. Sometimes we see the obvious, and sometimes we don't see the so obvious, and sometimes we see what we think we want to see, and other things we think, well, that isn't good what he's doing up there, so that must be bad. What I'm saying is this. We've already got our ideas, preconceived ideas, what we see even before we see them. There was a guy called John Bradford. Have you ever heard of him? Some of you, maybe Sue, you'll be old enough to remember this guy. He was around in 1510. But he was an English reformer, and he was a martyr who was best remembered for these words. There, but for the grace of God, was John Bradford. Yeah. He remembers you. And these words were uttered by Bradford while he was in prison in the Tower of London, and for crimes against Mary Tudor. And he said these words as he saw another criminal being led up to being executed. And that's what I see when I look at those pictures. But for the grace of God goes me. That's what I see when I look at those pictures. You remember that story in Luke chapter 7, when Jesus, his feet have been anointed in a Pharisee's house, in Simon's house, and we talked about the idea of things that are clean and things that are unclean. Well, this is total unclean. This Gentile woman, this woman off the street, gone into a Pharisee's house. She's not even supposed to do that, but she does. And she walks in and she starts giving the hospitality to the very person who the host should be giving the hospitality to. And so, when you read the full story, you see that Simon gets a little bit upset with Jesus. And he's like, if he knew what kind of woman this was, he would know what kind of woman this was. She's a tramp type thing in Simon's mind. And then Jesus sort of twirls it around a little bit in verse 44 of Luke 7. And he says, Simon, do you see this woman? Do you see this woman? I mean, how could Simon not see her? She's smacked there right in front of him. What do you mean, Jesus? Do you not see this woman? The problem was that Simon saw a tramp. Simon saw a sinner who just wasn't good enough for the love of God. And so Jesus more or less tells him the reason that he didn't see her clearly enough is because, Simon, you don't see yourself clearly enough. That's what he's telling them. And one of the amazing things about Jesus is his ability to see people as they could be, instead of who they used to be, or where they're at now. That's one of the amazing things about Jesus. And so if we're going to help the addict, we really need to look at them through Jesus' eyes. Not through our eyes, through his eyes. We need to look at them as what they can be, what they can become, instead of what they're at the moment. It's very important. There are times we need to stop and we need to just put ourselves in their shoes for a little moment. And this is where I want to get a little bit interactive as we go along here. Think about this, for example. If somebody comes up to you and asks for help, do you really believe that quoting book, chapter and verse is going to help them? Of course it's not. At that moment in time it's not going to help, because they're not there for that. They don't want to know book, chapter and verse. I understand the Bible is a great book and it's a source of all spiritual things and it's really good for us. But at that moment in time, it's actually not good to the addict. But here's the thing. The very fact that they came to you for help, think about it. That tells you at least two things. First of all, they want to stop the addiction. Or at least try and control it to a degree. And secondly, they want to change that negative feeling. Remember I was talking about that most addicts take drugs or alcohol or they're addicted to whatever because it helps them change the way they feel. It gives them a way of escape, if you want. Well, here, because they've asked you for help, that could be a sign that they want to change the way they feel in a positive way. So, let me give you this. You ever seen this film? Shawshank Redemption. I love that film. It's one of if I preach from films, this is probably one of the films I preach from more than any other film. But there's an amazing scene in here with this guy called Andy here, who's on there, and he ends up in a prison, Shawshank prison, for a crime that he didn't commit. And he makes time with this guy. He's called Ray. And they're sitting there and they're having their sort of like daily conversations, as they do, because they've not a lot else to do in there. And they're having those conversations. And Red turned around and said something really interesting. He says, Andy, says, these walls are funny. First you hate them, and then you get used to them. Enough time passes, you get so you depend on them. Let me tell you something. That's the life of an addict. That's what it is. Well, at first you absolutely hate yourself for doing it. You do. But a little bit of time goes by and you get used to doing it. And then you learn to depend upon it.
That's the life of an addict. That's what happens. Now, to most people, giving up an addiction isn't a big deal. You know, to most people, it's like, oh, you can stop that any time. It's not that big a deal. Loved ones, let's get real. Let's get real. To the addict, giving up something is absolutely colossal. No matter what it is, it's absolutely colossal. And if they're coming up to you and asking you for help, you better believe this is a serious cry for help. It's a serious cry. It's like David, David at the back was talking about, in his class, about people waving. You know, people are waving because they're saying hello, or they're waving because they're panicking, they need some help here. And that's what these guys are doing. They've come to you, so what are you going to do to help them? Now remember, if they're Christians, the chances are we could take them to the Bible, and we could help them that way by praying with them, and help them with book, chapter and verse if you want. But if they're a non-Christian, you need to have a different approach. Let me give you a scenario. A man walks into your assemblies, whatever congregation you're a part of, okay? He walks into your assemblies, and he's obviously an addict, because like we saw one of the other pictures, you can see needle marks all the way up his arm. So it's quite clear. And he asks for help. So what do? Now, you know he really wants help because he hasn't asked for money. Yeah? Because that usually happens, doesn't it? They come and they usually ask for money. But he hasn't asked for money. He says, listen, I'm addicted to whatever, and I need your help. What are you going to do? What are you going to do if that happened in your congregation?
Find out the basics, don't you? If he's got a home, if he's got food, if he's got warmth, if he's got clothing, and make sure those needs are met. Whether he needs help with benefits, or does he need to refer to an agency, specialises, or does he just want someone to talk to?
Okay.
Find out what that immediate need is, because you can't automatically say, well, just stop. Because that won't work.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Yep. Okay. I think you started with the right approach, and the right approach is we need to listen. And I'd like to tell you something. Okay, listening is I believe a gift, because some people are not good at listening. I myself struggle with listening because I'm too busy talking sometimes. I'm being serious with that. I talk too much instead of listening to what somebody's actually saying to me. James chapter 1 verse 9 is often quoted up there. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Now remember that a vast majority of addicts have got a low self-esteem. They're used to being around people who are either using them, abusing them, or just don't care, or really doesn't matter what happens to them. They're used to being in that kind of company. And so a simple thing, like just listening to them, it's going to send them a powerful message that you're genuinely interested in what they've got to say. Remember, they've come to you, and they're usually talking all sorts of junk because they're high out of their heads, but they're coming to you for help. So just listen. And so everybody is unique, like I said. And whatever addicted person comes into your assemblies, you need to treat each one different. You know, you can't treat the drug addict the same as the gambler type thing. You know, you have to think about it a little bit, and the only way to think is by listening first to see what that addiction is. And so explain to them. They come in, explain to them that whatever they're going to tell you is going to be in complete confidence. Tell them that, unless it endangers their lives, or it endangers the lives of others. You have to make that very, very clear. And so explain to them that you may not have the experience to help them, but we know people who do. Yeah? Listen to them. Be honest with them. And so the first question we have to do, first thing we have to do is listen. And after we finish listening, we need to ask them the question. And I think out of all the questions, this is the question we need to ask. What can we do to help? They're like, what? They're used to people condemning them. They're used to people pushing them away and turning them away. And you're like, what can I do to help? We don't go jump in there telling them making a mess of their lives. They already know that. There's no point in doing that. And if anybody needs or knows what area they need help on, chances are it's the addict. They'll know. They'll know about other programs out there, but they just don't know how to go about getting into them, probably. That's part of the problem. And so tell them that, you can help them help themselves. And that's key, to help them help themselves. And on many occasions, you know what an addict needs? Just some love. Just some support. And that kind of like what Mark was saying in his class, it's not just a case of saying God loves you. Sometimes you just need a bit of a hug to go with that and say, God loves you this much. To show the love in action if you want. And so, we need to remember that we will help the addict as long as they are willing to help themselves. That's key. And you need to remember there is no quick fix. Okay? There is absolutely no quick fix. We need to adopt the Lloyd's TSB slogan where it says, in fact I can get it up there, we go, for the journey. Yeah? We need to, if you're going to help, you need to be willing to go for the journey. And believe me, it could be a long journey. You could be there for weeks, months, or years. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as we go along. And so, as long as you're giving advice, as long as they're taking that advice and putting it into practice, be with them no matter how long it takes. When I'm helping addicts, the first thing I usually ask them is the question which I had to ask myself. We've asked them the question, what can we do to help you? The addict needs to ask themselves a question here now. And that question is the same question that Jesus asked the guy, remember when he was by the pool at the sheep gate? In John chapter 5, 1 to 6, we find that a man who had been lame for 38 years, and Jesus comes up and asks him an absolutely amazing question. He says, do you want to be made well? Now on the surface, this is one of the most cruelest questions in the Bible, isn't it? What do you mean? I've been like this for 38 years and you ask me, do I want to be made well? That almost sounds cruel. And I say one of the most unfair questions in the Bible, because the other one, I believe, is when Jesus was ascending up to heaven, in Acts chapter 1, verse 11, where the men say, men of Israel, why are you standing here looking up into the sky? If I just saw Jesus going up to heaven, would you not be standing there like that? I'm sure I would. So anyway, that's another question. The point is this. An addict cannot help, you cannot help an addict unless they're willing to help themselves. You can't help anybody unless they are willing to make that decision to help themselves. And so they have to make the first move. They need to want to get well. Because if they don't, you can help until you're blue in the face and nothing's going to happen. Nothing at all. So we've listened. They've told us that they really want our support. So what do we do next? And I use the word we in both terms of the church and the addict. Somebody's walked into your assembly. One of you have sat them down and you've listened to them. What do you do next? They've told you that they really want help and you're just the person to help them. What are you going to do?
Try and find the help.
Try and find the help.
You don't know yourself, do you, sometimes?
Yeah. And it's interesting when everything goes black there, isn't it? It's like, what do we do next? Depending on the conversation you've obviously just had. But if the guy said, I truly want to get well, then we need to know in our heads, okay, where are we going to go and what we're going to do to get that help. We've got a duty as Christians, as James 1:27 tells us, pure religion and defiled before our God and Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself sustained by the world. What is he basically saying? He's basically saying we've got a duty to help the helpless. We've got a duty to do that. And so depending on the addiction and the circumstances, we can start that support process. And so not only will this test the addict to see if he's genuinely wanting to be well, but you know what else it's going to test? It's going to test you as a Christian to see if you genuinely want to help. to see if you generally got that love with action behind it, to see if you genuinely want to do that. And please know, there is no shame in admitting that there are certain areas that may take you out your depths. And sometimes we need to protect ourselves, and sometimes we need to look after ourselves. So what you could do during that moment of silence when you've been listening is say, okay, I appreciate you coming in here. You've got a problem with alcohol. We'll use that because it's no common one, okay? You've got a problem with alcohol. Why not come back in a couple of days' time, we'll meet up again and we'll deal with that. Yep. I've done nothing heavy. You did no research, nothing for that. You've listened. But you've set up the next meeting. And that's really, really important because they're used to being pushed. They're used to being rejected. They're used to people saying, yeah, I'll turn up for that, and nobody does. On a negative sense of the thing. So, set up another meeting, and it's during that time we do our researches, and we can help in a practical way. Other members, is everything okay with that guy? You don't have to go into detail unless the guy said it's okay to go into detail, but the church can pray. Yeah, the church can pray for him. And remember, you don't need to know the details because God does. And you don't need to know that. James 5:16 again says the prayer of a righteous man has great effectiveness. And so we pray to God. Why? Because we recognise that He's the great physician, not us. He is. We pray to God and ask for wisdom, for His help, so that we recognise that we can't do it on our own. And so after we've prayed, that's when what you said next comes in. And what you said, you look at the resources. What do we do? Remember that list? The top 10? All of that stuff's freely available on the internet. Tons of material on there that you can get. The chances are that our congregations are filled with people who are former addicts. If we were honest enough, chances are. And some of the best tools we've got at our disposal are sitting here right in front of us to help the addict. They're right there in front of us. And remember, nobody, like we saw in our last lesson, nobody starts out to become an addict. You know, nobody gets up in the morning and said, what can I do today? I know I'm going to become an addict today. Nobody does that. And so if you're working with somebody, and in the back of your mind you're hopefully, Lord willing, they want to become Christians, one day, remember that you weren't born a Christian. You're a born again Christian. And so, be patient. And what better person to help another addict is a former addict within our own congregations. You know, think about it. You wouldn't go to your neighbour for advice about marriage if they were single. You wouldn't go to the garage down the street about a health problem. You wouldn't do that. You have to go to the right sources. And so as Christians, we need to remember that our sources are right here on our doorstep. We don't have to go running around everywhere all the time. There are times we have to. So they're here right in front of us. So these former addicts, which is you and I, we could actually help. We can help them because if we just remember, before we become Christians, we overcome addicts. We overcome addictions. And we can help those addicts who are still addicts overcome theirs. This will make a bit of sense in a second. I think over the years we've kind of neglected our own numbers, our own people who have overcome addictions in their lives. And if we want people to become Christians, I think we need to start telling people these things. Let me ask you this. What kind of resources outside of church could we go for help? Aquarius?
Sometimes citizens' advice as well.
Yeah, well, it depends on what kind of advice there is, isn't it? It's got a little hit list again, the resources. And there's a whole bunch up there, and you'll notice I've all got names. The Aquarius one is an interesting one, because when I was involved in this sort of thing, I was going to encourage somebody to go to Aquarius when I discovered that Aquarius don't actually stop them from drinking. what they do is they encourage them to control it. And what over a period of time, for a year example, you go in there for the first time, you're like, I'm having 10 pints of beer a day. A year later at Aquarius, you're drinking 5 pints a day, but that's okay. AA, that's not good. You stop. Complete. Zilch. Nil. So, although there's offshoots of different groups, we need to be careful which groups we're sending them to. And so, that's what we've done. You've got your research. And remember, none of us may be professional counsellors, although some of us may be. I know I'm not. But we have loads of tools available to us if we would only tap into them. And so we're getting ready for our next meeting. And so when we set up that next meeting, when they're going to come back, you've done your research. You've got some leaflets on whatever the addiction is. You've spoke to some people who are former addicts within your congregations. And maybe you've got some sort of idea now what the addict is going through. You're in a better position to help. And so, they come back and you have the next meeting. What do we do next?
Hopefully giving that help, but you go with them.
Go with them.
Yeah.
If they're interested, yeah. Find out what they're willing to do and support them along the way.
Indeed. And that's. I'm so glad that people are saying that, because some people are scared of what happens next at this point in time. Now, this is a point in time when you do put those plans into practice. It's all about getting them in touch with the right people. That's what it's about. Point them in the right direction, and your role is to help them go in that direction. You explain to them what your role is, and let them know what's expected of them. And as we're going through, we need to keep asking the question, are you sure you still want to get well? That's the question that changed my life, by the way. It took me years to discover that question. But that's the question. Are you sure you want to get well? We give them the leaflets that we found. And we ask them if they're willing to go along to Sex Anonymous, for example, that we have discovered meets once a week in the community centre down the street here. Yeah? Because if you get something like that, you'll be amazed what you can find in a very short space of time. And so you went in, you prepared, you're all ready, you've got the leaflets done, you've got a little insight to what they're going through, and you're not there condemning, you're saying, here you go. Here's the direction you need to go in. This will help you in the process. Now, this is going to be absolutely huge, and I'm glad that you guys mentioned this. An addict, to go to any of these meetings for the first time, scary. I remember the first time I went to a church building. Whew! All these holy people in here, like, here's me, the dregs of the earth coming in, type thing. You know, it's scary, isn't it? Well, it's the same for an addict. And I'm glad you guys said that. Go along. If you can. Go along and support them. Listen to what they've said. Sit in these meetings, and I'll tell you what, they will open your eyes up to the way that other addicts have overcome their addicts. But remember, phone up first, because sometimes it makes you go what they call a closed meeting, which means it's only for addicts and you're not allowed visitors and friends and that to come along. But if you get a chance to go along to these meetings, go along. They will totally open your eyes a little bit. And please remember, they are going through the addiction, okay? Not you. They're going through it. And you're simply there to support them. To help them push forward in their lives. To encourage them to start a better life. And I don't want to spend the rest of the time talking about what happens next, what happens next, what happens next. Okay, I don't want to do that. Sometimes people take that help and a little later they fall away. Okay? These things happen. You cannot take that personally. You've done what you can with the tools that you've got. So don't take that personally. And remember this, if any addiction was easy to give up, our phone lines wouldn't be filled with helpline numbers. They're absolutely filled with them. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds for all different things. So, continue the support if they're willing. Text them now and again. Call them now and again. Visit them now and again. Just to see how they're getting on. Not 24/7 in their face, by the way, because let me tell you something, they will take advantage of you 24/7 if you let them. So be cautious with that. You've got a life to live as well. And so I've had times where I've had alcoholics call me up and say, Mike, I really need help. And I'm like, what's happened? And they're like, I've had 5 tins of beer. And I'm like, call the appropriate people, I can't help you. Now that sounds cruel, doesn't it? It's kind of like we were talking about earlier. An alcoholic will talk to another alcoholic in a language that we don't even begin to understand. A drug addict will talk to a drug addict in a language we don't be able to understand. We need to learn that language. And it's amazing, going along a couple of meetings, how quickly you pick up the language. And that's the mentality. On the surface, it sounds like cruel. Do you want to get well? On the surface. But underneath that, there's a deeper meaning. And that's what we're trying to get to with them. And so remember, if we're helping people and they stumble, doesn't mean that they've quit. Some people stumble, but get back up again and keep going. You know, I had 30 years of absolute junk in my life. 30 years. And, you know, these things just don't go away overnight. So you need to be patient. Be patient with them. Be patient with an addict. It takes time to take all that junk out and replace it with positive things. It takes a long time. And so, over a period of time, you might begin to build up some sort of relationship with them, and maybe you've never even mentioned the Bible at this time. Maybe you've had 2-3 meetings, or you've never even mentioned God at this point in time. But remember, they came to you.